That's what hurts the most, is a lack of respect. Except for the other thing, that was when he got raped in prison. But that hurts the second most is a lack of respect. Great film if you haven't seen it. It's okay because it's man rape, so we're allowed to joke about it. Glad to have this next guest. He does not agree with me on a whole lot, but we found some common ground on Big Milo's whole web show. You can watch his show, Rubin Report. Is it rubinreport.tv in YouTube? Do I have that right?
RubinReport.com, aura.tv/RubinReport, youtube.com/RubinReport.
Okay, hold on.
DaveRubin.tv. That's my.
Okay, now you just go quiet as I go. We introduce Dave Rubin, like you haven't heard from him yet. There's so many different websites, but like you said, he's got, Rubin Report. So thanks for coming on the show, man.
Crowder, it's good to be with you. We've been sort of in the same circles for a while, and people said I should talk to this Crowder guy, and then it appeared.
And then I'm sure you got comments immediately following that, like, do not talk to this Crowder guy. That's how the internet works.
There was a lot of do not talk to him, don't like him, disagree with him on everything, I'll watch this one thing. Back.
Yes, hold on one second here. I believe we're having some audio difficulties. Not gay, Jared? Are they working? Because I'm hearing him dip out. No, we're fine. All right, sorry. Yeah, that's how it works online. And it's funny for people who are listening who don't really know. You would line up more to the left, atheist. I don't think I'm outing you as one of the gays. And I line up more to the right. But you've come out against these sort of social justice warrior leftists now, the progressives who are really trying to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like you've recognized that they're clamping down on speech, that they don't believe in an open form of ideas. How new has this progression been for you, and why have you sort of taken up that mantle?
Yeah, well, first off, let's call them what they are, which is regressives, not progressives, right? They're not for progress anymore. They're actually for regression. That's what they're actually doing. I come from the left, so it hugely saddens me to know what's going on right now, because these are my guys. And that's why I've been so outspoken about it. Because if someone on the right says something crazy, that's for you to deal with. You know what I mean? Like I can talk about it, but that's your home team, and that's for you to deal with. And the way I've seen my side, the left, go bonkers about free speech and political correctness, and everyone they disagree with is a racist and a homophobe and a sexist. And it's dumbing down dialogue to such a point where we're getting, on one hand, I have hope. I have hope that we're getting to a tipping point where, guys like us who probably don't agree on a lot of things can talk about this.
Right.
Hopefully we tip that way. We tip towards conversation.
Right.
But I also think there could be a tipping point where these guys break everything down to the point, and identity politics breaks everything down to the point where all we do is fight. Right. And we've got enough of that already between everyone on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So for me, my awakening, really, it was a couple things. It started with the Charlie Hebdo thing, which I think was it's almost a year now. It was about 10 months ago. I think it was in January.
Right.
And I saw guys on my side who were more concerned about political correctness and were more upset by cartoons than the actual 12 dead cartoonists. So that was like the first piece of it for me, where I really thought, wow, we're really doing something backwards here. And then a bunch of other things happened. But the real defining moment, and what I think was really the seminal moment for a lot of people, was the night that Sam Harris was on Real Time with Bill Maher and got into the big fight with Batman, with Ben Affleck. And Affleck called them gross and racist. And, Bill Maher especially, forget Sam for a second. I told Sam when I sat down with him, I didn't even really know who he was. I'm not even sure if I was following him on Twitter that night. I wasn't a fanboy of him or anything like that. And here I saw like a clean, clear, lucid guy explaining some polls and explaining the circles, the difference between religion and ideology and people. And Bill Maher, who I'm sure you disagree with on probably everything, but Bill Maher, who stands for every liberal principle ever, right?
Yeah.
So for him to be labeled racist, the next day, what really culminated, what really crystallized it for me, was that the next day in all of the sites, Mediaite, all the media sites, they were all saying, Sam Harris and Bill Maher are racist, or are Sam Harris and Bill Maher racist, or whatever.
Right.
And it's like, Bill Maher had never been called racist before. He has stood for every other.
Yeah, but he called all
ever,
conservatives
you know?
racist for a really long time. So with Sam Harris, I give him some leeway, but Bill
Sure.
Maher's whole thing was the Tea Party is racist. People are only calling Barack Obama socialist because they can't use the N-word, and then his audience claps like a bunch of trained seals. Whereas now, you've got Bernie Sanders, you got Seth MacFarlane, them coming out saying, we are European socialists. And as someone who was raised in socialism in Quebec, I was like, oh yeah, no, Barack Obama's policies they're socialist. It's not a dirty word where I come from. We have liberals, liberal separatists, and socialists. So it was part of the political vernacular. So with Bill Maher, yeah, I think that if you were to go back now, and he were to make religious now, he would focus a lot more on Islam than he did, because I think that backlash changes you.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing. You know, if you watch that, or if you just know the breadth of his work, this guy has spent far more time actually on Christianity, right?
Sure.
Because he lives in a Christian nation, so he's always fighting the power there. So he spent far more time on that. No one ever called him a Christianophobe, right? He relentlessly mocked Orthodox Jews in that movie. No one said he was a Jewophobe. So, you know, it's this meme of Islamophobia, and we have to be able to separate ideas from people. I have nothing against Muslim people, but there is a doctrine out there, which is just written word, that has some pretty bad shit in it, and it's being used for bad reasons, to do things that liberals should be against, chucking gays off the roofs of buildings in Syria and Iran. I'm pretty sure that's not a liberal principle.
No, I know. You'd be safe, though, because they really just chuck you off a roof if you have a lisp. There's no actual legal recourse for like what are your sexual practices? They just see you're like, is he sashaying across the desert?
Gay?
Yeah, we throw him.
He's not really gay.
He's not really gay. It's not gay if he's 12. That's the whole rule over there. Of course, people are going to get mad. No, listen, it's a real problem, and I've talked about this for a long time. Obviously, listen, I'm a Christian. I'm more conservative. Conservatives would call me libertarian. Libertarians would call me conservative just because of my personal values. But I've tried to be consistent with it, and I've always said I do not have a problem. Why don't you make fun of? I mean, I make fun of Scientology and their sort of volcanic overlords. I think it's funny, but I don't really go after Buddhism, Scientology as much. Even Mormonism, with which I really disagree, because they're not killing people in record numbers. And I'm not talking, 12 members like a Westboro Baptist Church. That's one thing we've pointed to a lot. And if you look on YouTube, you see these sort of liberal sides. They spend so much time on Westboro Baptist. There's 15 members, 12 of which are family to the founder. There are hundreds of millions of Muslims who believe you deserve to die for converting, or that women need 4 witnesses to prove it. Hundreds of millions of Muslims. And we have to turn a blind eye to it.
The Westboro Baptist Church is a great example.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a great example, because the Westboro Baptist, everyone knows it's nothing. It has no influence. It is an absolute joke. It is not considered mainstream or even decent or anything by any standard. But everyone on the left will grab on anything they say and say, Christians.
Do you get their press releases?
And it's crazy.
The Westboro Baptists, all they do is send out press releases. Do you ever get them?
Oh, really?
No,
not on that list.
No, well, one of my home
spam.
station there in Detroit, they just send it out to all like traditional radio. So I don't get them personally, but Wham over there, they were like, just constant pressers. And liberals are just like, see, this is emblematic of Christians. Let's ignore the hundreds of millions of Muslims. And like you said, listen, it doesn't mean you hate Muslim people. This is what I've said. Not all Christians are perfect. Of course not. Even if you don't believe in the historical figure of Jesus, the idea of Jesus was good guy, regardless of whether you think he's someone who existed or not. Not every Muslim is a terrorist, of course not. No, of course not. Muhammad was. He was, and he instructed people to do that. And that's politically incorrect to say, and I've been saying that for years. I mean, he's decapitated Christians and Jews. His last words were calling for the deaths of Christians and Jews. Does it mean that that's all he did? No, maybe he did some good stuff, but people get really, really uptight if you start bringing that up. And Ben Affleck, you can't stand Ben Affleck. I won't speak for you, but you must have wanted to punch him in his bat face.
Well, first off, I don't even know that I can go see that next Batman movie just because I hate him so much now. Look,
Matt Damon is Robin. Is that what's going on?
Look, I thank him because he really did cause my awakening by being such an over-the-top buffoon. Let's put it this way. If you were arguing with someone, forget even on your radio show, but if you were arguing at a bar, you met somebody that you disagreed with on everything, right? Yeah. And you're really into it with this guy. It would take you more than a minute to call him racist, right?
Ben Affleck?
Virtually, it would take, no, just anybody.
Oh,
if you
anybody.
just met
Yeah,
anybody
yeah.
and you were arguing, it would, and the fact that he went in and within a minute threw out the racist canard shows you that there was some, there was some sort of, there was a play there. There was a move that went beyond, just casual conversation.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't want to get too hung up on him.
No, but let me ask you this. Let me ask you this point blank, seriously.
Yeah.
Before your awakening,
yeah.
were you a part of the sort of mass of leftists who said the Tea Party was racist?
Listen, I would welcome any of your viewers and listeners to go to every video I've ever done. It's pretty rare that I would throw around the racist, the word. I can't say that I never said that there weren't racist leanings in the Tea Party or something like that. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure. But I never, even before this awakening, I never was one of those people that tried to do that. I'm a firm, look, you could be against abortion. I don't think that means you hate women. You know what I mean? Like,
of course not.
This is stuff that's coming from the left. It's just so stupid. It's so stupid. And I never was that deep in. I've always considered I have a lot of libertarian beliefs too. So I've always considered myself a little more.
That just means you want to do drugs.
Centrist. Well, I can't deny that.
Yeah, that's what it means. When liberals say,
yeah,
that was like Bill Maher. He used to claim to be a libertarian for years, and people go, well, Stephen, you're so much more. When I would do all the tests, they go, you're libertarian. Why don't you claim it? I would say, well, because Glenn Beck, Greg Gutfeld, and Bill Maher all claim to be libertarians. So you do the math. It doesn't mean anything anymore.
Bitcoins and hacking.
Yes, Bitcoins, hacking, and pot.
Pot,
is what
Milo says.
Well, do you think that maybe it's just you're not hateful? Do you think that's what it is? Because it seems like, I will say this, and you get some elements of it, I would say, on the far, far right, of course. But I certainly feel like mainstream leftism right now, because mainstream is trigger warning. Mainstream is accusing conservatives of being racist. Mainstream is hands off my uterus. Mainstream leftism just seems to be much more vitriolic and closed-minded right now. Not saying that's always the case, and you just don't seem like that angry of a person. You think that might be a part of it?
Listen, I got shit to be angry about, you know what I mean? Like, I did stand-up in New York City for about 14 years. If you're not an angry, crazed whack job doing that, then I don't know what is. But I guess it does. Listen, I believe that people can believe different things in me and be as principled as I am, Right. And that's what we're so sorely lacking. You know what I mean? Like, let's argue about some stuff here. So let's go to some stuff that we disagree on. But I believe, and I'm pretty sure by the end of it, I'll still believe that you're principled in your beliefs. And that's the type of stuff that I just don't see out of that side. And I want to bring them back, but I don't know. But as for tolerance, I don't know which side is really worse in the scheme of things. Look, you've had Mike Huckabee on. I once debated him about that whole idiotic Chick-fil-A thing. He puts out a ton of really pretty gross stuff about gay people. Nobody wants to talk about the gay thing anymore. It's over. You know what I mean? I'm married. Big goddamn deal. Nobody cares. You know what I mean? I do the same shit that you do at the end of the day. And by talking about that and making those people the other, there's hate there too. So we shouldn't make it
I want
seem
to touch
like
on that when you get back,
exclusive.
so that way we can trade some barbs and make it more interesting, because apparently it can't be friendly for Mr. Rubin. We're going to go to our evil capitalist sponsor, Overlords, for this right-wing program. Of course, louderwithcrowder.com for those who want to hit the extended interview. Stay tuned, or we'll chuck a gay guy off a roof. We are back with Senor Dave Rubin, because this is a multicultural program. Rubin Report, you can find it at rubinreport.com or watch him on YouTube. And you were saying before this, so my example of, the sort of hateful left is pretty much all of the entertainment industry, pretty much all of higher education right now, Tumblr, a huge portion of Reddit, trigger warnings, free speech police. Yours was Huckabee. So, and I did have him on the show. Now, I like Governor Huckabee. He's a nice guy. If you've ever dealt with him, he's a really, really nice guy. I'm not saying that I don't endorse any candidate. You said he puts out some really gross stuff about gay people. So what is it, for example, that you would say someone like a Governor Huckabee would say about gay people that would be on par with, you're a racist for being against Barack Obama, or you're a rapist for not supporting Lena Dunham?
Right. So, well, look, I'm not going to defend anyone that uses, just throws out the racist canard, as I said before.
But that's mainstream
but
leftism,
that's
is my point.
Word. Right, sure. So, and again, I'm not going to defend that because I'm on board all
Okay.
of that stuff. But it's just a word, however damaging it is. It's just a word when you say that. What Mike Huckabee is doing, Mike Huckabee is using the Bible. But look, I don't think Mike Huckabee is truly running for president right now. I think he's running to be the president of the Christian conservative wing of that party, and that's fine. I don't think he's really believing that he can win the presidency. He's whatever. But look, the Supreme Court decided equal protection under the law. The ship has sailed. So when something happens like this Kim Davis thing, and he implies that she shouldn't follow a law that goes against her conscience, that has nothing to do with how the Constitution works. So you as a conservative,
right? But neither did the Supreme Court decision.
That sort of
we know that. So you can concede that for starting off.
No, but the Supreme Court concede what?
Well, okay, let's start with this. Tell me how the Supreme Court has the authority to create laws.
Well, it was on equal protection of the law. It was the equal protection clause. So they didn't create a law. It was equal that we should.
Well,
all
they
have
went and they
equal
tried to
protection.
find the
Well, whatever.
right. But my point is, there is a legitimate case, and it's made by many not Christian libertarians that. I mean, listen, Schoolhouse Rock, go back to the three branches of government for a reason. The Supreme Court does not have the power to create laws. Now, they can argue that they were basically going through a clause and saying, well, it's equal protection, so it's not creating a law, it's recognizing a law. That's not what happened. And certainly if you contrast it with a healthcare mandate, with some of the other things they've done, which I think we would all agree are very authoritarian, that is a legitimate argument to be made, whether you agree with it or not. Just like your argument is legitimate that once it is law, if you work for the government, that's very different from working for a private business. And I've conceded that many times with Kim Davis. The problem is the law was changed after she signed up. She signed up for a contract that was changed. And I think that's what Huckabee was more concerned about.
Right. So, okay, so let's not get hung up on the Supreme Court stuff. My point with Huckabee would be that at this point, as a conservative, I would venture to say that by gay marriage becoming legal, did it affect your marriage in any way? Did it? Because that's what they always say. It's going to ruin the institution of marriage. I mean, all of this.
I've never heard anyone say that,
not
though.
True.
I've never heard Huckabee say that.
But they do say that. I'm sure you can find quotes of Huckabee saying that or something to that effect.
No,
it's going to ruin
I'm
the
not seeing
institution
that.
of marriage.
I think that's
all of these.
No, I think that's beneath you. I don't think that's a genuine argument. And that's not an argument that, listen, come from... Go ahead.
No, well, listen, shouldn't you as a conservative, if you were a true conservative or anyone that's a true conservative, you would want small government. And by small government, that means you would not care. You should not care what a person does with their private life. So if two men enter a legal binding contract that's of the same validity as a man and a woman, that would be the true conservative.
Well, hold on a second. Let me give you a
couple of months, some conservatives saying that.
Couple of problems. Obviously, making that argument, you don't believe in limited government in most capacities. So that's an argument that's really just being used against conservatives to point out hypocrisy. I understand it, but let's be honest about that because you don't care about limited government. That's okay. I understand that that's your worldview. But then we have to go to...
No, I do. I'm not one of the deep off of the deep end liberals, so I do.
Okay. So you are against the Affordable Care Act. You would be against the progressive tax code that, like Bernie Sanders, you could not in clear conscience vote for a Bernie Sanders or a Hillary Clinton then you're extreme left, in my opinion. Bernie Sanders, 90% tax, 70% tax up there. How can you say you're anti-authoritarian when it comes to speech, but somehow it's totally okay to be authoritarian when it comes to dictating the amount of success someone can earn? I just don't. I don't get it. I'm sorry.
Well, first, I don't know that you can put Hillary and Bernie in the same thing with the taxes because it's a little unclear to me if she's even said anything about taxes. Not that I believe
she's too busy killing guys.
Right. So the Bernie thing is different. I like Bernie's heart. I really do. But can we pay for this stuff? I honestly, I don't know.
No. Hold on. This is important.
Go ahead.
So you're not an extreme leftist. I'm not talking about the pragmatic. Do you believe that somehow it is more morally justifiable from an anti-authoritarian standpoint, which you claim to believe, for a progressive tax code that takes away 2/3 of what somebody earns?
So I believe you can have a progressive tax code that doesn't attack you for being successful. I think there's ways. Look, when they say, it's the 99% versus the 1%, it's a really silly argument to demonize the 1% the way we do, because if you're in the 1%, it's from a lot of studies, it sounds like you could make around 400 grand a year. Now,
Yeah.
I don't make 400 grand a year. I don't know how much you make, but I wish I made 400 grand.
You don't know. We have our secret
but the point is
cis
that,
straight patriarchy meetings, and we all make more on the dollar than the gay dudes. So
yeah,
I'm doing
you guys,
better.
I know you guys all make. But my point is, at 400 grand, you are not pulling any strings in the government.
No.
You have no influence. You know what I mean? What we're really talking about is the 0.1%. So believe me, I get it about some of the language that's being used by the left on all this stuff. As for the progressive tax, I think there is a way to tax without totally burdening, without totally stifling success. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
But as a general rule, I don't have a problem with the people that make. If you make $10 million and you're taxed at a slightly higher percentage, I have no problem with that.
Right. They're already taxed at half, though, at least, more than half. So really we're talking about going to 70, 90%.
But there's also a zillion loopholes and all that kind of stuff. And, you know.
Yeah, not really. If you're looking there, the top 10% pay 73% of all taxes, only earning about 40% of the income, and top 10% is $150,000 a year or more. I think it's really the people who are really getting screwed are the 100,000-aires right now, which are most small business owners. But we're making some good headway. Let's keep some momentum going. We'll go into the web extended version.
Keep it going.
With crazy extremist gay Dave Rubin, but we love him. RubinReport.com. Stay tuned. Louder with Crowder. All right. Sorry, Rubin. No, listen.
The lack of professional.
The lack of professional. That's what Norm Macdonald and Dirty Work. That's what hurts the most. Is a lack of respect. Except for the other thing, that was when he got raped in prison. But yeah, it hurts the second most is the lack of respect. Great film if you haven't seen it. It's okay because it's man rape, so we're allowed to joke about it. So we were talking about this before. So we got off on the progressive tax code and the Bernie Sanders thing. I understand where you're coming from the same-sex marriage. Now, what I was saying is, using that argument, when I think we've sort of established that you're certainly not more limited government than someone like me or Huckabee. Your argument as they are on the moral side. Okay, understand that given to you for some Christian conservatives. But it's a little disingenuous to the Kim Davis thing. Not that but the arguments that are used is as simple as, well, she came in and she is not obeying the law. Well, no, and I do think that if you're working for the government, you should either obey the law or leave your post. But that's not the same as a pizzeria not wanting to cater a gay wedding that constantly serves gay patrons and just says we don't want to be involved with that specific activity, just like Jared probably wouldn't photograph a gay bachelor party. It's not the same thing. And we've used that Kim Davis thing to sort of conflate issues. Now, when it comes to the government and marriage, here's a libertarian perspective, which is mine. I don't believe that marriage is a fundamental human right. I don't believe it's a human right for straight people or gay people. It's not a right. So you have to say, why do we have marriage? Why do we have marriage in the United States? Why does it exist? And there's a very, very clear historical timeline as to why it exists. And that goes back to the limited government. The reason they wanted to actually be involved in the family is so they wouldn't have to be as intrusive in federal and state government. That, hey, we want the central building block. We want tax incentives for husband, wife, and children because we believe that is most productive toward a growing, booming society that will create better communities that can self-govern. That's why marriage was recognized. So with that argument, there's a perfectly valid argument to say, listen, it's not a human right, it's a contract, and these are the terms of the contract. I don't think that's authoritarian. Like I said, I'm starting from the point that it's not a human right for either straight or gay.
Right. So going on your premise, though, so you would be okay under those circumstances with gay marriage, right? I think you're making the argument for gay marriage, right?
No, I'm not. I'm making the argument that government shouldn't be involved in it, and if states want to...
I think you just made... That sounded like a pretty...
No.
That sounded like a pretty solid argument.
No, because the reason was men, women, children, because they said, mommy, daddy, kids, that's how we want to build American society. You may not like that culture, just like I hate crappy Mexican culture with the highest murder rate of anywhere else in the history of ever. I think it's a bad culture. You might not like that American culture, but that's a part of the culture here, and it's always been that way. And I don't think it's invalid for someone to say, well, marriage isn't a right, it's a contract, and these are the terms of the contract, and it's always been, up until now, a man and a woman. That's not authoritarian, that's business.
Sure. So if a gay couple moved next door to you and had two adopted kids and paid taxes exactly as you do and do all the exact same civic things that you do, what would your issue be with that? If they performed for society in the exact same ways that you do?
Well, there is no issue with that, but that's not what we're
What would be
talking
your-
about. What we're talking about is a Supreme Court forcing all states to now recognize one term for marriage, whereas we let states set their own divorce laws. We let states set their own alimony laws. But now we're saying that states can't have any authority as far as recognized marriage laws. Why can't a state say, we're not doing any marriages at all, we're not recognizing any religious marriages, and you go down to the city, states should have the right to do that, and now they don't. And you have pastors like where I was from in Canada, Stephen Boisson, who have been banned from public speech for saying, I'll never marry two dudes. Why? Because Canada declared marriage a fundamental human right. And I think people need to understand that's why we're having the bed and breakfast, the pizzerias, the bakeries being sued, because it's a violation of human birthrights to say, I don't want to be involved with that specific activity. And I think that's a problem.
Well, listen, all the stuff with the pizza makers and the cake makers and all of this stupid shit. I mean, that just shows you how idiotic this conversation has gotten. And I will grant you in this regard that this does show an example of where some level of Christian bigotry does come out, because let's be very clear here. If a gay couple had gone to Lansing, Michigan, or outside of Detroit, where there's a huge Muslim population, and went into a Muslim bakery, if such a thing exists,
I did it. You haven't seen my video?
Gay cake. Did you do it?
Yeah, it has like 4 million plays. I went into I'll send you the video. I went into a bunch of Muslim bakeries, and they were very, very uncomfortable.
Okay, well, look, see, my idea that I'm having years later. Well, all right. So all right, so you've already proven my theory. Or,
yes.
By the same token, I don't want to make this just about Muslims. If you had gone to, some ultra-Orthodox Jewish area in Brooklyn and forced Orthodox Jews to bake a gay cake, they wouldn't be happy. And big fucking deal.
Well, that's the thing. It is a big deal. Elsewhere. You can't say you support the Supreme Court decision and then say big deal, because it is a big deal if you believe that the Supreme Court has to declare marriage a fundamental human right, because then businesses can't deny people of their human rights. That's why it's complicated. That's why conservatives have a problem with it.
Well, look, it's a slippery slope and it's complicated. And by the way, I would have friends on the left that would argue that, if these places use our roads and use our electricity grid and all those things, then you're not allowed to discriminate because of equal protection under the law.
That's a stupid
argument.
argument.
That's a pretty good argument.
It's a silly
argument. I think
argument.
It's a pretty solid argument.
It's not a solid argument.
You that I'm coming a little center.
It's a silly, goofy argument. Don't bring shame to the great race of the gays by using such faulty logic. How dare you?
Listen, don't you think ultimately, seriously, don't you think that if at the end of the day, if 6 months from now I come back on the show and there is literally no reason to discuss this, because gays got married, they got their cakes wherever the hell they got to get their cake. It just doesn't matter. It's so exhausting and stupid.
What does matter if 6 months from now we are just like my home country of Canada or the UK, where businesses are being put out of business for not wanting to be involved with for no longer having rights as a business. Businesses have always had no shoot, no shirts, no service. They have the right to discriminate based on behavior and activity, not skin color, not gender, although some libertarians would argue yes, certainly based on activity. And a gay wedding or a gay honeymoon in your bed and breakfast where it's in your house. Listen, I get it. I had a gay roommate in Chelsea. I lived with for 6 months. You guys, the
You lived with a gay in Chelsea?
Yeah, the refractory period was absurd. It was very, very, it wasn't a peaceful experience. So I get it. And they should have the right to do that, but you can't.
This whole thing was just leading you to say refractory experience, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. I remember actually having that conversation with him. Like, how, like, you're just putting on a show because, I'm in the next room, right? Like, that's just, it's true. Chelsea. Yeah, we lived right above a place called Grey Dog, which is a completely copied Zingerman's Deli model from Ann Arbor. So
that's 16th Street, right?
Yes, you know it very well. Surprise!
I've been to Grey Dog. I don't know your roommate.
You probably do, actually. He shall remain nameless, but he was a booker at Fox. Really good guy. And then he wasn't the booker anymore. And then there was a girl who was a booker who kind of had a crush on me, and so I had to kind of fake it to keep getting booked on the show. And it was a very uncomfortable period. We've gotten way off topic. I understand where you're coming from, but I do think that you have to look, if you're going to look at case studies of where marriage has been declared a human right. it is used, like Milo has said, for the gay bully pulpit to then bully Christians. And I definitely see that as a problem. And it's certainly not as simplistic as how does it affect your marriage?
Listen, I would say that maybe we'll get to a place where this really was the problem. Is that pizza place in Indiana? I'm pretty sure they're still open, right?
The pizza place? No, they're gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, no, they're gone.
Are they gone, really?
Yeah, they raised. As a matter of fact, they raised 130 something thousand on Kickstarter, and then they said we're not going to give it to you because hate speech.
All right. Well, look, I didn't know that. I don't take any pleasure in hearing that.
That's
So,
really bad.
I get it. Yeah. You know what? That is bad. And also not allowing someone to marry the person they want to marry is bad too. I think two things can be true at the same time.
My wife didn't want to marry me for a good long while. I mean, I just don't get why it's
sure
like no. Many times now, she's regretful. Thank God we have a contract. But that is, what are you talking about, KJ? Are you just smirking? He's just smirking over here. I don't know what his issue is. I'm sorry, Dave.
Just smirking.
He's just giving me this dirty little smirk. He's a horrible human being. Yeah, I think we made some headway there, and we can move on to sort of the social justice warrior left. So you were talking about the progressive tax. At a certain point, though, I know right now you still say you are more progressive, they are regressive. But when the entire party platform is based around these ideas, and when you look at Barack Obama, who's out there spouting the wage gap myth, talking about needing to correct social injustices for women, for protected minority that really don't exist at this point. When you look at Hillary Clinton, who's doing the whole thing, acting like it's time for women, or Meryl Streep, when this is the party platform, right? I know I'm not saying you have to defend all Democrats, but that's the party platform, and that seems to be such a key issue for you. What do you do? Where do you find yourself? How do you have to vote going forward?
Yeah. Well, listen, first off, I'm an independent. So although I was registered Democrat my whole life in New York, when I moved out to California, I'm not registered as anything. So I consider myself an independent. Look,
Except
when
those dimples
I've
are
been
registered
going to
weapons.
I've been going to the debates, and I've been in the spin rooms, and I've talked to a couple of the candidates, and I've been around the show and all that. I mean, look, it seems pretty obvious to me that when I've watched the Republican debates, the profound, and look, we can partly blame this on CNBC because that one was an abject disaster
It was
altogether.
embarrassing.
It was horribly embarrassing, and they look, the moderators were horrible. The candidates, Kasich seemed like he snorted some coke right before. They were all babbling all over each other, and Trump has got them so whacked out. He has the whole lot of them just so crossed up and so not sure of themselves that it's fun to watch, but I don't think it's good for the party or for the country. The Democrat one, what I think is really interesting, and I'm pretty sure you'll agree with this, is that, yes, they've moved left to the point that a guy like Jim Webb, who would be considered a blue dog Democrat, a Democrat that's a little more to the right, he seemed like a cartoon character up there. You know what I mean? Like, now, again, his temperament was bad, and he was very petulant and sort of angry, but he seemed like a Democrat of a complete other time.
Yeah.
And I think that does show you that the party has moved left. I know most of my progressive friends are thrilled about that. But look, as I've said all along about Bernie, even though I like a lot of the things about him, can Bernie actually win a few of those swing states? And not even that. Will the party ever even back him? Even if he got the groundswell that Obama had, 7 years ago, would the party ever actually back him over Hillary? I just don't think so.
So as someone who sees himself as somewhat limited government, you would vote in clear conscience for someone like Bernie who wants to tax people like me 70+%, remove health care choice, take away gun ownership rights from law-abiding citizens while providing more rights to criminals.
But I don't think he wants. No. First off, they were attacking Bernie
for having a D- NRA. That's one thing,
So-
actually, I say. The intellectual diversity on the left, you have to admit this on the right? Just to kind of go back to your point. You've got, obviously, the diversity that leftists always want to enforce through their silly community organizing. I know, it's racist to say that. But you have natural diversity in the conservative movement. You've got Rubio, Ted Cruz, Latinos, woman, Carly Fiorina, Ben Carson, black guy. And then and by the way, not kind of black guy, raised to a single mom in Detroit. This isn't AAA ball. He's playing for the MVP All-Star team, okay? This guy had the real black experience in America, even though the left always tries to claim you can't be conservative and black. And then you've got, let's talk about the intellectual diversity. Well, the experience diversity. You've got business owners, you've got politicians, you've got people who are governors, senators, you've got people who've never had any political experience. Intellectually, you've got Rand Paul, who's all about that cannabis oil. You've got Chris Christie, who's a war hawk. You've got Carly Fiorina, who's in the middle. You've got Ben Carson, who's more of a Christian conservative. Just a huge, huge spectrum. The left, they agreed on every single issue. The only point in which they disagreed was they all bragged about an F rating from the NRA, but Bernie only had a D-. How can we say these people are open-minded at this point?
Look, as the liberal, I'm supposed to come on here and I'm supposed to defend people on the left. I would love to see a much bigger tent. There's probably a number somewhere between like 2.5, which is the Democrats really have 2.5 candidates, right? Mm-hmm. You got Bernie, you got Hillary, and half of O'Malley. There's probably a number between 2.5 and 87. The Republicans have 87. I think that's probably too much too. If you could have 6 legit candidates that believed in different things on each side, that really believed in the extreme parts of the party and then the centrist parts of the party, I think we'd have a much better debate. Look, the Democrats are supposed to be the big tent, right? They're supposed to be the big tent, but I don't see a minority up there, So I'm with you on that stuff. And again, I hate to parse it down to that because then it starts becoming about identity politics.
Well, no,
right?
I mentioned the intellectual diversity. Saying, it's not only all old white people, it's all old white people who are career politicians. So intellectual diversity, diversity of life experience, and of course the color palette. And that's nearly always the case. Go ahead. The difference though with Bernie is that, look, he's much more anti-war than Hillary. He didn't vote for the Iraq War, for example. I think he would be very hard to be pushed into any military action, where I think Hillary would be a little more he's a
hawkish,
pussy.
Right? He also really, be that as it may, but he also really wants money out of politics. He's talking about those kind of things while she's taking hundreds of thousands of dollars for 2 speeches from Goldman Sachs. So there is some diversity.
Well, and
there.
Millions of dollars in foreign donations, which is borderline illegal from countries that support terrorism. There's that.
Yeah, listen. They all do terrible things. I think this is they're all equally funded by awful things, and they're all equally dishonest. Like, they're just not honest, and they're not good.
I think that's a general rule, but I think whether you agree with him on a lot of things or not, I think the Ben Carson. Here's a guy, Ben Carson, horrible in debates, not a particularly eloquent speaker, no political experience. The reason people like him is because he's probably like nearly every candidate we had up until modern media, left or right. He just seems like a decent guy who's speaking honestly. Whether you agree with him or not, he doesn't seem like we know, if you trace the money, he's not the kind of guy who comes from the pocket of big special interest groups. He's not been in the bloodstream. He didn't even plan on running until basically it was like, here's a pile of money. We really need someone outside the system to run. I'm not saying he's my guy, but I don't think it's fair to say I think you do have some people like him, or even someone like a Rand Paul, who certainly seems to be swimming against the stream.
No, so I'll give it to you on Rand for sure, because he has definitely staked out positions that were going to put him at odds with the party, stuff with the NSA and all of that stuff. So he definitely has that libertarian thing that makes him different from them. As for, look, Carson is not going to be the nominee. You can quote me on that right now. There is just no way in high hell. And do you really look? This guy, he clearly doesn't know anything about foreign policy. And partly because of the war that Bush started in Iraq, and now how Obama has dealt with these last 7 years, I think foreign policy is going to be a major piece of what happens for this country in the next 5-10 years, because the Middle East is in a complete freaking meltdown. So when we go in, we screw things up, and when we leave, things get screwed up.
What else is
Carson? I don't think. Listen, do you think Carson knows the name of any prime? I bet you, if you said to him who just won the Canadian election, he wouldn't know. Like, I just don't think he has. I think he's a smart guy. Obviously, he's a neurosurgeon, all that. This doesn't strike me as like the leader of the free world, this guy.
Yeah, but neither did Barack Obama. Barack Obama has been just routinely embarrassed, didn't know names of world leaders, didn't know anything about Canada. Obviously you have the gaffes with him and Biden. I mean, he's just as bad as any president we've ever had as far as being glib. You're glib when it comes to foreign policy. So, Yeah, a junior senator about whom we knew virtually nothing. I don't know. I'd put that up against an actual brain surgeon and say the brain surgeon has a better chance of figuring it out. And at least we have his college and health records.
Right, but well, they're not running against each other. What do you make of Rubio? Because I think
I like Rubio.
strongly disagree with him. I strongly disagree with him on things like abortion, and he does bring this Christian right element to it that I personally am not that comfortable with. But at least when I watch him, I sense this guy's in the right line of work. Like he should be up there. Maybe it's a little premature, but I think he's a pretty decent human being with a compelling story, at least.
Yeah, I think he is too. I mean, he's more kind of politician-y and seen that way. We've had the reason we had Huckabee on, we have a rule. Well, this rule, because you're on the show. Hey, we do this with everyone. We say, they go, well, what talking points? We say no talking points. If it's something you really want to hit, let us know. Maybe we'll fit it in. The only two candidates who agreed were Carly Fiorina and Governor Mike Huckabee. We've reached out to, not all of them, but we've reached out to a lot of them. Now, does it mean that my show is so huge? Well, no, but when it comes to conservatives, people running, if conservatives want to reach the 25 to even 40-year-old male, they come through here. Most of them don't really care. And so I get that. I think that's where someone like you would find more common ground with those people, as they largely feel ignored by the party because they're pandering over the Social Security vote and selling self-lubricating pocket catheters. Of the people who I think are most impressive, when it comes to foreign policy, as far as who really knows what they're talking about, you've got Rubio, and if you listen to Fiorina talk about foreign policy, any question, she lasers in. You might not like how she lasers in or on what she lasers in, but she lasers in. She's not.
Well, it seems like she just did her homework, right?
Well, she's, in business, she's
Rubio,
done a lot of international deals too, as well. So she has a lot of experience from the business side dealing internationally. And I would assume as a woman dealing with tech and people in the Middle East, she probably really had to have her. They don't respect you if you're doing business and you're a woman over there, even if it's in Dubai or Abu Dhabi. They still treat you like crap. So that's an inference. I don't know her experience personally. I do know that when my friend went to the Abu Dhabi grappling tournament, she was there competing. She was invited because she was nationally ranked. So the Saudi prince or whatever flies you out, and the women were not allowed to walk right out onto the mats. They had to walk outside of the stadium and walk back in. So they never walked across in front of men. This is a nationally televised grappling tournament in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, depending on the year. This is the most progressive area of the Muslim world. And you're still a second-class citizen. I would imagine she's dealt with that.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm with you, and we can circle that back very easily to the regressives, because this is what they've done. They have no problem with any of that. They have no problem with how women or gays, or even if they have some intellectual problem, they don't want to talk about it.
Right.
Because they've framed it, because by calling everyone else a racist, then they're afraid they're going to be called a racist, which also Islam's not a race.
No, it's not.
So they've pinned themselves in such this tiny idiotic box that our ability to say, women shouldn't be treated like that in Saudi Arabia. Maybe they should be allowed to vote, whichever year they push it off another year, or they should be allowed to be in a car without a man or whatever. And meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is pretty much, in a lot of respects, you could argue, is our biggest ally in the Middle East now because of what Obama's done with Israel. So, yeah, it's a freaking mess.
It is a mess. Although, you let those Saudi women in the car, next thing you've got Caitlyn Jenner. It's a slippery slope. Manslaughter, you're getting away with it because you put on a dress. So let's kind of talk about.
Is he going to get away? I said he. Is she going to get away with it?
Okay, there you go. You said he. What is that? The whole trans thing. We're not editing this. We're not deleting it. Honestly, the whole trans thing. Are you just like, hey, it's all completely just the same as the gay movement, or do you feel like it's been a little hijacked? Do you feel like it's absurd? Because I'll be honest, it's pretty damn absurd when I go to a feminist film festival and they don't have a male or female restroom. They have a gender neutral restroom and then a male identify room, and it's like just crap where you want at that point. There are no guidelines. Come on, you seem like a reasonable guy. Where do you line up on that?
Well, I've said this many times before. When they say the LGBT community, they're just putting these things together.
No, it's LGBTQAI.
Great. So, QA, yeah. I lost all the letters. I have a thing down here that has all the letters. But the thing is, as a gay man, then there's cisgendered and all this other stuff. Like, there's all of this stuff. I don't have that much in. I shouldn't, by definition, just because I'm gay, I shouldn't have anything necessarily more in common with a trans person than you do. You know what I mean? Like, we're just lumping all of this stuff in together. So look, I want these people to be treated well. They've been treated horribly for a long time. I want them to be treated equally. Let's put it that way. But you know, stuff like that with the bathroom, I don't know. It's all just like.
See, you see what's happening here? You see what's happening? Yeah, I'll just get along. You just were thinking out your ideas out loud, and you came to a point where you couldn't make a decision because you've been in the world of situational ethics for so long, and you're waking up where you can't go, no, cock, no woman's room. You can't bring yourself to say that because you've been told for so long that that's hateful.
No, I like how you did that there. That was a good little thing that you did.
Thank you.
But I just don't. The thing is, I just don't think it really matters. I think that if there is a trans person that wants to go into the bathroom that you're in, if there's a woman that's transitioning to a man or has transitioned into a man and ends up in your bathroom, like, I know it's like buzzwordy and, you know, you can get all whatever about it, but like, it doesn't really affect you. It really doesn't.
Well, it really does affect the majority of women who certainly feel uncomfortable with men in the restroom.
So yes, there could be some pretty, you know, there's this thing now with this kid in the locker room. You heard about this?
Yeah. We wrote about it.
So I guess that every now and again there could be some instances where someone uses this story or whatever for the wrong reason, so that some 15-year-old boy can, in a girl's locker room, you know, like everything, nothing for the system. So, but I would always try to veer.
Hold on one second. We're losing you completely. This is the web extended version, so thank God, but we're losing you completely. Jared, is there anything? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear you. All right, Jared, you recording?
Yep.
All right, we're still going. Okay, sorry. Go ahead with you were saying sometimes people might use the laws to get their penis past security.
Yeah. So every now and again, yes, there is going to be a guy who's just using this to get his penis past security and wants to get in the girls' locker room like every 80s comedy. You know what I mean? Like, yes, I can't deny that every law.
Only Jimmy has one secret. Uh-oh.
Like just one of the guys, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there were a lot of great
But it's
movies.
not every now and then. Listen, it has come on so fast and so. I mean, how do you explain Fallon Fox? Have you been following that? The male MMA fighter? Yeah, male to female MMA fighter who's beating up women for living in the cage, just beating the ever-loving shit out of them. And as someone who trains in it, and I talked with Joe Rogan about this, I'm not a pro, but I'm pretty good at the ground game, equipped enough to recognize technique. It's not technique. It's just man smashing a woman like Bam Bam with Dino and whacking the hell out of them. And if you speak out against it, it's hate speech. And they trot out some professor or some surgeon from the head of transgender surgery to claim that there are no health. Here's my issue. Obviously, all those issues. It's silly. It's absurd. Culturally, it's corrosive. But we are also ignoring a delusion and willingly putting these people likely into a shallow, cancerous grave when we know what these hormone replacement therapies do, particularly to men with estrogen. And we're doing so in the name of tolerance. I just find it absurd.
Well, all right. So I don't know about the science part, but wait, let's just back up for a sec. What did Rogan, because he's obviously also being in the MMA space, what was his take on it?
Yeah, he thought it was absurd.
Really?
So did Ronda Rousey.
Guess, look,
Ronda Rousey said she wouldn't fight Fallon Fox, and they said she was guilty of hate speech. She's like, this is someone who was a man with a son until he was 32, and then decided he wanted to be a chick, and then, I get to beat the hell out of women for a living. I have a very simple rule. You're born with a penis, you don't get to beat up chicks.
All right, listen, this is one of the instances where that slippery slope thing, where, as I said, I'm just trying to err on the side of people that are being othered, right? This is an instance. Look, if a guy, I'm trying to think who's like a really, Blake Griffin, I was trying to think of like a big, good basketball player. I was going Stephen Curry.
And you went biracial, so you can have the card. I get it. Go ahead.
If Blake Griffin suddenly tomorrow said, I'm transitioning and I'm going to play in the WNBA, I guess intellectually I would say, well, if he always felt like he was a woman and he wants to do this, then so be it. That said, I know it would be slightly ridiculous for Blake Griffin to be playing in the WNBA. So yeah,
That
again,
being said,
two things could be true at the same time.
It'd be the best thing that ever happened to
But
that
I'd like to see that
WNBA. All of a sudden, everyone's tuning
maybe
in.
that's
And
yeah, maybe
Blake's
that's what
playing
the
street
WNBA
rules, throwing bows. Yeah, I don't. I think it's. I think. Listen, I think. I'm certainly not right on everything. I think everyone is one, but I think that you've sort of had this awakening. But I kind of see that thought process occurring here, where now you have to rethink some of these issues because it's been framed so often as hate versus love or discrimination versus tolerance, and that's that's not the case. I think the trans movement is coming on so hard and so fast. I think the gay community effect with this because people are definitely feeling like it's being force fed to them, and people aren't going along with it. Lesbians, particularly, a lot of them hate it. I'm sure you know. I mean, there's huge factions in the gay community who feel like it's hijacked, and but again, you can't go back. Once you go down that sort of slippery slope, you can't say, well, no, this is a no. I hate to do this. This is not doing the Santorum or Huckabee thing, but why do you think Salon now feels like they have to do 3, 4, 5 posts asking people to understand pedophiles who've been othered? This is not some fringe salon. Today's salon is tomorrow's HuffPo. So I think the slippery slope
salon is garbage.
Yeah, but
you're not going to get an argument from me.
Yeah, but it's not all that different from HuffPo when you look at what they write, which is the biggest news site in the world. They're not too far off from each other. Even then, 3 years ago, if I were to have told you, well, you know what, you're going to see pedophiles having platforms with hundreds of millions of readers, you'd say, no, if you're just doing that's the right-wing hate mongering. Well, here we are. 3, 4 posts. And the guy, I don't know if you saw, I wrote about the guy, and then he looked down at me as being a right-wing extremist hateful. And I was like, yes, if you molest children, I believe you deserve to be killed.
Yeah, I'm a little behind. Every now and again, a story, I say this every few months, like just something that's going on get past me, because I can only put so much in my head, and I don't even know what happened with that whole thing. That one just like went past me.
Well, they've had
I don't
3
know.
posts.
But I would tend to think I probably agree with you on that.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is it's just at one point it would have been seen as so absurd that this could happen. Now, the slippery slope is I'm not comparing gay people to pedophiles. I'm not comparing gay people to bestialists. Is that the word? I'm not doing that. Okay? So I want to make it very clear so people don't Santorum me and go, you're saying you're doing this. The point is 3 years, the slippery slope argument was, well, this is going to happen down the line. Not comparing two groups, but what will be permissible. 2 years ago, saying, well, Salon will not only basically defend a pedophile, they will then rebut people who were appalled that a pedophile was defended and then write a third piece defending a pedophile. If you'd have said that 2 years ago, they would have called you a right-wing hate monger. And here we are.
Salon is crap. we can agree on that.
All right.
Yeah.
We can agree on that. Okay, so what is your, we don't want to keep you too long. These things we did like Sargon for 4 hours. So what is your biggest issue kind of moving forward? You're more to the left. You're evolving because of the way the party has sort of regressed. You've got elections coming up.
Yeah.
So mainstream leftism is social justice warrior leftism. How do your priorities shift out now? How do you move forward? And do you find that the conservatives and the libertarians who maybe you feared for a long time are more accepting than you thought they'd be?
Well, listen, Crowder, you're good because you've hit on what is my, it's not just I'm open that I'm upset about the regressive thing, but like I am sort of struggling with, where my place in this is. And I think I've found it in that I'm calling these guys out, and that's why the show is working the way it is, and that's why the response has been it, because people have been people on my side have been starved for this. And look, I wouldn't have been doing it the way I have if someone else had done it. I was just waiting for someone to start saying the things that I was talking about from my side. So look, maybe Milo and you and a couple and Rogan even were saying some of this stuff. Rogan, I guess I consider more on my side of things, but there just weren't enough voices doing it. So I'm happy that it sort of worked. And all I'm doing is saying the things I believe, and people are responding, which is nice to be in our spot. And they sit there and say the things that you believe, and people go, "Oh, that's what I believe." That's pretty nice. So what I want to happen now is I guess I want the progressives basically to be destroyed altogether. I want liberalism.
Really?
How is that? Was that, like I want to fire up the Death Star super laser and get rid of these guys. They've hijacked liberalism. Liberalism, when it's done right for the right reasons, I think is a good thing. And it watches out for the other while it doesn't demonize everybody else that disagrees with it. And I think real liberals are better at debating ideas than most of my friends on the right. We've done it well here today, but I think generally, more liberals are better at that. We got to get that back, because if we don't, this country is just on its way to just permanent stasis of spinning out of control. Because if the left can't debate ideas, we're seriously fucked. So if I can play some part of that,
Yeah.
then that's the part I'm going to play.
Do you think that's going to be difficult for you because, and this is something I've talked about, and a lot of people don't like the left-right the sort of left-right prism, but it's true. It is true. It is a prism. There is left and there is right and there's in the middle, and it's okay to do that. I have no problem saying liberals believe this generally, conservatives. It's not like it's not like that's just reality. And people are like, well, no, it's authoritarian and it's a vertical. It's like just shut up, okay? Left versus right. Like every country recognizes it. We're trying to cut through the BS here. I have made this argument, and I've seen it with a lot of leftist friends. Some people who actually won't name here, but who you would know and I would know, where because of the fact that conservatism is based on the ideal of individual liberty, it's why the Republican Party is so fragmented. Right? It's a lot harder to get them to rally behind one person. They destroy each other in the primaries. Whereas since leftism, progressivism, whatever you want to call it, is their value, their central tenet is the collective is more important than the individual, they certainly are more prone to groupthink, I would say. I mean, if you look at the Democratic debate versus Republican debate, I'd like to see if you think there's some truth to that, and if there is, do you see it particularly difficult for someone like you or voices like yours to change?
Yeah, well, look, clearly that's why what we're doing is working right now, because people have been starved for this alternate voice on the left, right? As far as, Republicans like destroying each other during primaries and things like that, I mean, what do they say is the 11th commandment, thou shalt not attack another Republican? I mean, Republicans I don't think necessarily do it any less than, I think that's just the game of politics. I don't think either side does it more or less. Like they all do what they have to do when they're running. So I don't know about the individuality or the collectivism in that. You're talking about the candidates, or you're talking about the supporters?
Well, I'm talking. Well, firstly, if you see it, I'm talking about the ideals. Conservatism is all about individual liberty, libertarianism. I put those again on that side of the spectrum because I can't go conservatives, neoconservatives, libertarians, pseudo-anarchists. I don't have time. So those on the right, conservatives, their central ideas are the idea of individuals and individual liberty. Whereas leftism, the Bernie Sanders, they point to leftist utopias like Scandinavian countries. The collective trumps the value of the individual. And so those are the central ideas, so I believe you see more groupthink. That's my theory, and I think you're seeing it play out, considering that everyone agreed on everything at the Democratic debate, and at the Republican debate, you have vehement arguments, not only over records, but over policies and ideas, whether it's over drugs, whether it's over war, whether it's over abortion, whether it's over taxes. You have a lot of different ideas there, and on the left here, sorry, I got to switch them for you, they're all the same. So for me, it's not that like I've been shunned, obviously. I've worked at every conservative place, and I don't play well with others. But it's not that out of place for someone like me or a Milo. For you, you're kind of like the kid who jumped into the pool for the first one of the season, but no one else jumped in with you.
Okay, so all right, now I got you. So what I can tell you is this: so I have a good friend over the last couple of years who's in our space, a public person in our space who's not going to be mentioned right now, who, after seeing the type of stuff that I've done over these last 2 months where I've been talking about this stuff and had a wide range of people, an atheist like Sam Harris, who wrote a book with a Muslim like Majid Nawaz, and then, someone right of Majid, but who was born Muslim, Ayan Hirsi Ali, and then just yesterday I had Douglas Murray on. I mean, a neoconservative. So I've really mixed it up all over the place. I had a person that exists in my space send me a psychotic email. This is 2-3 days ago, about how I'm a racist. And I've finally been exposed as a racist. Because this person lives firmly in that regressive left world. I said to
and you're very white. Continue.
And just white, whatever. But I said to the person, can you give me an example? Can you watch all the videos that I've put up? Can I get an example of where I lied, where I was racist, where I claimed it was all people, where I was talking about people instead of ideas? I mean, the litany of shit that we go through for all this. Did not get a response on any of that. And I just wrote back and I was like, you know what? You proved my point here. So yeah, that place isn't my home. There's no doubt about that. But there is a new movement brewing. And, I think it may be a little closer to some of the things that you believe in than even you want to admit, maybe more than I want to admit. But those guys, their day is done. The justice warriors, all that bullshit went so over the top and so crazy with everything that the average person they know in their head at the end of the day that not everyone is dictated and makes decisions based on color and sex and whatever, that we're all human. I want to be judged on the content of my character, nothing else, Let me be judged by what I think and what I say, nothing else. And I think most people want that. So their day is done. And I got to help blaze a trail for this new space.
Well, their day is done, but on the Democrat side, that's all the main candidates are social justice warrior candidates. I mean, certainly Hillary, without a doubt, if you look at the stuff that she's putting out there, and you have Barack Obama trotting out social justice warrior points. So that's mainstream.
So even in the context of that, if you look at what the Black Lives Matter people, when they grabbed the mic from Bernie, remember that?
Yeah.
You remember that? Yeah. So think about that.
Very funny,
here
but it was
you have
horrible.
a guy. Well, but here you have a guy who stands for every progressive principle, right? Everything that, if you had the checklist of what progressives and people on the left should stand for, he's got them all. But identity politics got it down to the point that the Black Lives Matter people, who I think have legitimate grievances, we have a lot of problems in this country, right? That they felt that they had to attack this guy because you've got it down to the place where everyone is in such a tiny little space of purity that if anyone's talking about anything other than the thing you want to talk about, then they're a traitor or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it's not good for the party either. It's not.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we'll leave on. And I have a question about your dog picture in the background. I was actually not attacked, but actually a good friend of the show, someone who's a conservative.
Sleeping right over there.
Oh, is it a pit?
She's part pit. Yeah.
She's part pit. Oh, okay, I'm seeing the picture. Yeah, I've got. He's sleeping right. We'll bring up Hopper Cam for people who are watching this in the web. But he's a Doggo Argentino. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like a picture an all white pit mixed with a Great Dane. So that's what it looks like. So it looks like a giant mega pit. It's funny. We rescued him. Broken leg, Lyme disease, alopecia. I volunteered at animal shelters. And this is a perfect example where I've gotten flack. We rescued him, and he's an amazing dog. But I also advise to most, if you have children, you probably shouldn't rescue a dog, particularly not a pit. How do I go, well, hold on a second. Because I've worked with them. And I've had dogs have recall, and they've been totally friendly, fine dogs, and you don't know what that's going to be. And so being more pro people, even though I love dogs, I'm going, so if you have children, it's best to get a puppy that's raised with the kids, get them conditioned, because you don't know with rescuing a dog. And people just, you're anti-dog. No, that's a perfect example of, I think that's a very reasonable point of view as someone who's rescued an animal to say it's not for everybody. And they labeled me anti-dog. Same thing with pits. Here's something I find funny about pits. Another kind of irony. People go, "Oh, it's not fair to generalize. It's not the dogs. It's the owners." Okay. Then they go, "Plus, pits are the sweetest dogs." Well, now you're just making a generalization. Some pits are assholes too. They could just do way more.
I can turn my laptop.
Yeah. Let me see.
I can turn my laptop, right?
Yeah. Let me see her.
So you want to see the warrior, the horrible pit, the angry.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, she looks like she maybe has some corgi in her.
Emma, do something. Yeah, she's part Basenji.
Oh, that makes sense. Does she have that weird howl?
She's got that crazy yodel. It's nuts.
Yeah.
She doesn't do it. She's about 12 now, so she doesn't do it like she used to. But actually, since you're a dog guy, I'll tell you one great adoption story,
Yeah.
and then we can wrap up. So she was born actually in New Orleans, and during Katrina, they found her in a box, and she gave birth during the hurricane, and she had 3 puppies with her in a box. And then she was basically, they all had all kinds of diseases and stuff. So they sent the dogs all over the country. And the hurricane, I think, was in the end of August. She was so sick, she wasn't able to be adopted till I got her on June 22nd of 2006. So it was about, a good 9 months later when she finally was able to be adopted. Anyway, she's had 3 names because they found her in New Orleans. She had a collar with no tags. They didn't know what her name was. Then at the Humane Society in New York, they named her Paisley. And then when we got her, we named her Emma. And the first day I had her, I'm walking her in Central Park, and this woman comes up to me and says, "Is that Paisley from the Humane Society?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she said, "This is her son, Bernard." And Bernard moved to the Upper West Side, and they lived 2 blocks away. So they survived that. The dogs were literally sent all over the country. And Bernard and Emma, they sniffed butt like only a mother and son could.
Wow.
And it was a beautiful thing.
That is a beautiful story. Well,
but as to your point, on the adoption, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of adopting. Of course, you never know what's going to happen. But you know what? You could get a dog at a pet store. You get a Pomeranian at a pet store that could bite a kid too. So it's
generally speaking, a dog, your best bet, a dog that comes from a breeder where you have family history and you raise it as a puppy with children is better for children. Hopper is great, except he's a little racist with like black boys. He's fine with black men. Black boys, he's just not.
See what you've instilled in him?
I know. Well, like black men, he loves them. Black boy, and they found him, roaming the roads with a broken leg, and we've had people actually immediately offer to breed him. Why? He's fixed though, so he can't. But why? Because basically he looks like this giant, super muscular pit, and he'd be great for breeding fighting dogs. So it's funny with young, like black boys, ages 6 to I'd say like 12. You can just see it's the one group of people he doesn't run up to be pet. So there's something there, and that's my point. It's not his fault if maybe he had a black boy hurt him at some point, and he's fine with the black girl next to him, and he's fine with the black boy's father, but that thing just gives him recall, and he wants to get away. And that's just kind of the luck of the draw with rescuing animals. And so I think it's kind of one of those sort of authoritarian statements. You're either all for it or you're all against it when there's a reasonable approach.
Yeah, well, as I said, I would always err on the side of the adoption. But I think, related to dogs and sometimes what happens with black men, someone told me this once. I have no idea if it's even remotely true or based in
You don't need to preemptively
scientific
apologize.
evidence or anything. But someone told me that, look, if you think, in the 40s, let's say, when black people were rioting and fighting for civil rights and all that, often the police would sick dogs on them.
Yeah.
So a certain generation of black men were either afraid of or had issues with dogs or whatever. Then that sort of gets passed down. So I would notice a lot of times when I was walking her, it happened more when I lived in New York City because now I'm in the suburbs here, so I don't walk past that many people. But occasionally, if there was a black person walking this way, if they tensed up, you know what I mean? Dogs are always
they sense that,
big on that. Like they can read how a person feels. So if the person tensed up because they don't like dogs for whatever the reason is, she would feel that too. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously that's not about race or whatever. The point is there's a lot of different things that cause why humans act certain ways and why animals act certain ways.
Right, yeah, with dogs, they do that stuff. And
you see what these fucking regressives did to me?
Yes.
You see what they did to me? That even to explain that, I was like twisting and
you have to apologize. Like, listen, some dogs don't like black people. Period. It just happens. It just doesn't mean you're coaching him that way. There's some dogs that do, some dogs that don't. Some dogs don't like my book. My literary agents person a while ago. She had a pit bull that hated tall, dark-haired men. Couldn't stand me. Loved the black guy who was her boyfriend. Loved my literary agent. But me, she was like tall men with darker hair, like you, and glasses. She's like, there's just something with him, you know? It's just the dog. Here's my, and then we'll leave it on this. This is what I was going to say before we got to the dog thing. My friend, conservative friend, he said like, well, that's borderline. What you're saying is borderline white supremacist when you say like, we don't need to recognize individual protected classes and groups. And I said, no, here's my point. I said, and if maybe a white supremacist at one point made this argument, doesn't mean that it's a racist argument. I said, yes, have there been injustices committed across many different protected groups? Yeah, of course. I don't think, though, you can use that, for example, the kid acting out, the black kid, the recent video, bullying a black teacher acting out, where you can say, well, it's because his great-grandfather was pre-civil rights era. No. At a certain point, this is what I just said, and I think this is as just as you can possibly be, and I'm writing a column about this tonight. We're either a country of laws or we aren't, across the board. Now, if we say we're going to enforce the immigration laws currently on the books, will that disproportionately affect Mexicans? Of course it will. But that doesn't mean that we're not applying the law the exact same way to an illegal Italian, an illegal German, an illegal Polish person. They're just not coming over in droves because of a geographical advantage. If we say we're applying the law across the board to crime, will it disproportionately affect maybe black people in inner cities? Of course it will. But that doesn't mean that we're disproportionately applying it differently to someone who might be a white person. It has to be blind. That's how it has to be in order for us to be honest and to really move forward. And he was going, well, I guess at that point it makes sense, because he was coming from the idea of certain communities and how do you appeal to them. And I just, you can't you can't do that for a country. You can't run a country that way, because like you're seeing now with social justice warriorism, at some point there's going to be a class that claims that they're pitted against another class, and you have to pick out which one wins.
Yeah, well, listen, obviously we don't agree on everything, but I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, as as I suspected I would. And these are the conversations that we need to have. You know what I mean? This is what everyone's afraid of. What the authoritarians really are afraid of is that people that aren't off the deep end left and people that aren't off the deep end right are going to start talking. And the more that we do this, you know what I mean? Look, I sat there for an hour and a half with Milo. He's talking a mile a minute. Half the time I didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. But I knew that there was, and that's what I said to his face. So I'm not talking shit about him. But my point is that if you can sit there with someone and go, this is what this person thinks, and I don't have to get all of it, but they're as principled as I am,
Right.
That's what the authoritarians don't want. So that's why we have to keep doing it. And who knows, maybe we'll do this next time, and I'll pull you a little left somehow, and you'll pull me a little right, and then a year from now we'll just switch altogether.
Was that a request for us to hold hands?
Or I'll just pull you left.
Yeah, that was a request to hold hands, I think.
A little game.
Yeah. You know what? I accept your invitation, sir. RubinReport.com or Rubin Report on YouTube. Jared, we good to just kind of let him go? Senor Rubin, thank you very much. Well, that actually means when we hang up, you're going to stay on, but we're ending the recording now. If you like this interview, click subscribe by clicking my face or the giant button that says subscribe. We have to spell it out for you in the YouTube comments section, because I know some of you're not too keen on politics, but you love weed. There are other interviews here with very interesting people, some of whom you may share things in common with. A lot of whom you don't. You people can get weird in the YouTube comment section. We're not complaining. We dig it louder with Crowder, but you need to know that it's off-putting to some people who aren't used to be called Jew fags.